Greetings, my name is Kerry and welcome back to my channel. Today I have for you another recent reads video. So this one is covering the period between my last video, which I think was the 3rd of May, and a few days ago, which was May 20th, because actually I wait to film these videos until I have 5 books to talk about, and I would usually talk about any books I finished between finishing the 5th book and filming the video, but I've actually finished another 5 since finishing the 5th one, if that makes sense. So I'm going to split it into 2 videos. So I'm going to talk about the 5 books I read between May the 3rd and May the 20th, and then in a bit I'm going to be filming another one which is books I finished between May 21st and today, which is May 25th. Without further ado, let's just get into the books. So the first book I finished in that period was The Herring Seller's Apprentice by Elsie Tyler. I gave this one 3 stars in the end, and I felt that was a little bit on the generous side. I didn't enjoy the first chapter, but I did enjoy the second chapter, which is why I decided to carry on reading it. So it's a cosy mystery. The main character is Atazadeh Atazadeh, and he is a detective fiction writer. He is assisted in this book by his agent Elsie Thurkettle. The premise of this book is Atazadeh's ex-wife has gone missing, and it's unclear whether she has taken her own life or has been murdered. Atazadeh claims that he has no interest in investigating it himself, but Elsie is quite keen to test out some of the stuff she's learnt about from Atazadeh's books and do a bit of sleuthing. There was quite a fun interplay between the 2 characters. It's unclear whether they actually like each other or not, which got a bit grating at times. I think what I found quite infuriating about this book was, I think it was meant to be tongue-in-cheek, talking about the tropes of detective fiction, but it was quite patronising about them, particularly about things like Agatha Christie's tropes and techniques that she uses a lot. It felt like it was really negative towards them, but it basically pinched a storyline from Agatha Christie. I think it was meant to be tongue-in-cheek, but it actually came across as patronising and full of itself. So I didn't enjoy that. It was way too predictable by the end. I figured it all out well before the explanation, which to me is just means that the writing's a bit lazy. It could be disguised better. Like when I'm reading an Agatha Christie, I get some of the clues, I pick up some of the twists and turns of the plot and figure some of it out, but I'm never usually all the way there. So to have figured out the entire breakdown of what happened in the story well before the end was a bit disappointing, really. And then also Elsie comes across in the sections that she writes as very self-confident, very happy with herself and who she is and how she behaves and what she wears. But then whenever Atazadeh talks about her, he's very dismissive and particularly focuses on negatively describing her appearance and her clothes and her love of chocolate. It felt quite fat-phobic in places, and I didn't like that. So all in all, I ended up giving it 3 stars. I'm not going to be carrying on with the series because I think the writing was just a bit lazy. And if I want to read cosy mysteries, I would rather read Agatha Christie than bad fanfiction of Agatha Christie. Oh, and yeah, the other thing was it kept putting in Atazadeh's efforts to try and write his latest detective fiction novel, and that didn't work for me. Like, there wasn't enough plot to justify having sections that were completely unrelated to the plot. Anyway, enough moaning about that book. It was okay. So next book I read, it's one of my favourite books of the year so far, and heartily gave this 5 stars. This was actually my theology book club pick for May, but I didn't talk about it in my TBR because I didn't know if it was happening or not. So I found out a week before that the book club was going ahead and bought the book and read it. I think in 2 sittings. I read it across 2 days. So this is Return of the Prodigal Son by Henri Nouwen. I've only read a couple of his books, but he is fast becoming one of my favourite writers of theology. He was a Catholic priest who spent time teaching in places like Harvard. Then for the last, I think, about 10 years of his life, he worked at a community for people with learning disabilities and was a pastor or chaplain in that situation. This book is his reflections on the painting The Return of the Prodigal Son by Rembrandt, which is the one that's on the cover there, and the parable in the Bible that inspired the painting. It was really powerful, really moving. He talks about his relationship to each of the characters. So in the story of the prodigal son, there is quite famously the son that takes his father's money and leaves. There's obviously the father who welcomes his son back with open arms when he turns around and comes home, and then there's also the older brother, who's this character who is really upset that his brother has been welcomed when he has wasted all this money. Henri Nouwen talks through how Rembrandt relates to each of these characters, and then how he himself feels he relates to each of these characters, and reflects on that and what that means for Christians today. Everyone in the book club loved this book, which is saying something because usually opinion has been really divided about all the books we've read so far, but this one was a resounding success. Everyone loved it, and I've actually since bought a few more of Henri Nouwen's books because just his way of writing is so engaging. Yeah, just he writes really powerfully but also really simply, because he wrote from a place of his own struggles. Like, you can really tell in his writing that he doesn't feel that he's someone with all the answers, but he's exploring these themes for himself to try and answer his own questions, and that comes across really powerfully in his writing. So I heartily recommend this book. I mean, specifically Christian people I think would gain a lot from this, but if you're even just mildly interested in the parable or in Rembrandt as an artist and want a bit of a spiritual reflection on it, then I think it's worth reading. I've actually bought a print copy of the picture as well, which is sat on my desk at the moment when I'm working so I can see it. Yeah, I really love this book, really beautiful, gave it 5 stars. The next book I finished was one I picked up for the Disney read-along that I was taking part in, and is the only one I actually managed to finish during the week of that readathon, but fortunately hit 4 of the challenges. So this was The Jinni by Bethany Atazadeh. This is the second book in the Stolen Kingdom series. The first book, The Stolen Kingdom, is an Aladdin retelling. This book is a Little Mermaid retelling, but the stories are linked, so it does follow on from the first book. You do need to read them in order. Most of the characters in this book did appear in the first one. There are some new ones, and the book is told from Rina's perspective, she is the Little Mermaid character, and I don't think we heard from her perspective in the first book. She came into that first book quite late on. So there's lots that's similar to the original Little Mermaid story. She, on her, I think it's her 16th birthday, is allowed to go up and visit the surface of the ocean. While she is there, she saves the life of not a man in this case, but a Jinni who has fallen from the sky. He's called Gideon, and she saves him from drowning and then develops quite an intense crush on him. She is the owner of something that is called the Jinni key, which is an artifact that was given to the Mer people from the Jinni as a symbol of peace. It was given specifically to Rina, and it has the ability to give someone who wishes on it what they most desire, but that is at a cost of pain to Rina. So she gets hurt by using the Jinni key, and she can't use it for her own wishes. So the situation arises that her sister wants to have ownership of this key, but it can't be taken, it can only be given. So she makes a deal with Rina that if she can win the affections of Gideon the Jinni, then she will be able to keep legs and stay on land with him, but if she doesn't, then she has to give the key over to her sister. So that is the premise of the plot. There's also continuing storylines from the first book that I won't go into because I don't want to spoil the first book. I really highly recommend this series. If you like retellings, I think these are really solid ones. They bring a really different perspective to the fairy tales than other retellings that I have come across. Yeah, I really like it. And Bethany Atazadeh is also an author tuber, so she talks a lot about how she writes the books on her AuthorTube channel. Good, solid fantasy fairy tale retelling. I think I gave this 4 stars in the end. I didn't enjoy it quite as much as The Stolen Kingdom, but I did think it was very well done. The next book that I finished was one of my Read Around the World books. So this is Shadows on the Tundra by Daria Grinkevičiūtė. I've said that really awfully and I do apologise. Daria, at the age of 14 during the Second World War, she's Lithuanian, and she and her family and many other Lithuanians were deported to Siberia by the Soviet Union and made to work in labour camps there. And this is her memoir of her experiences. So at the age of 21 she managed to escape back to Lithuania, and she wrote down everything she could remember about her experiences on scraps of paper and hid them in a jar in the ground because she knew if they would be found then there would be repercussions from the KGB. And that is a big reason why we don't have a lot of information about what happened in these labour camps, because anyone that spoke up about it or wrote about it at the time it didn't go well for them and any evidence was destroyed by the KGB. So this jar with her writings was found in 1991 and she died in 1987. And then it was published and it's recently been translated by Perrine into English for the first time. This might actually have been the first book I got from my Perrine Press subscription in 2018. This was really powerful and really difficult to read in places. So I'll give a content warning, quite graphic descriptions of illness and injury and starvation, intense cold. She lived through the Arctic winter in this Siberian work camp and they were still expected to work up until a point where the blizzards were so bad that they couldn't physically work. A lot of corruption as well, because it was written a little bit after the fact and she was there for 7 years before she escaped. This seems to cover just the first couple of years, like the harshest winter she was there, but there's no sort of sense of timeline really to do with that. Yeah, it was fascinating and it was heartbreaking and really intense. Not necessarily something I would say I enjoyed reading, but I appreciated it, and just speaks to the tenacity of the human spirit that she and her family and various other people survived this. A lot of people didn't survive what she went through, and she talks a lot about the people that didn't survive and what happened with them as well. Really, really powerful. If you're interested in stories from the Second World War and stories that we maybe don't always come across in the UK, like we hear a lot about the Blitz and the Blitz spirit, this is a really interesting story. If you're interested in the Second World War, I would recommend checking this one out. And then finally, the last book I'm going to talk about in this video was the other one that I started for the Disney read-along, but I didn't quite finish it within the week, and actually wasn't the one I said I was going to read for that. I ended up picking up a different book, which was Picnic at Hanging Rock, which was a book I had out from the library. This is a classic mystery novel. It was written, I think, in the 60s, but actually is set at the turn of the century in Australia. On February the 14th, 1900, the girls from the Appleyard Finishing School go to Hanging Rock for a picnic. 3 of the girls wander off to climb the rock and they are basically never seen again. And one of the teachers goes missing as well. So it's all about the repercussions of this event and what happens afterwards. I picked this up because, as you can see there, it says now made a TV series. So I watched the TV series recently, a couple of months ago, and I was really intrigued to pick up the book. And the book was a lot slimmer than I was expecting based on the 6 or 7 episodes that they made into the TV series. And that is because they did add a lot to the TV series. This is a much simpler story. For the TV series, they aged down, I think, all of the teachers in this book, both Mrs. Appleyard and Miss McGraw, who's the teacher that goes missing, are described as fairly elderly ladies, so sort of in their 50s or 60s, comparatively elderly. In the TV series, they're both meant to be like in their late 20s, or I think Miss McGraw is put in her mid to late 20s and Mrs. Appleyard is put in her mid 30s. So there was a bit of a difference in the ages there, and in the TV series as well, they added a lot of backstory for the different characters that doesn't get covered in here. And I understand why they did it, and it was brilliantly done, and I really did appreciate that in the TV series, but I actually really enjoyed the simplicity of the story, like that we don't really know very much about them, particularly Miranda, who's one of the girls that goes missing. We don't really know anything about her in this book, other than that she had blonde hair and everyone liked her. Yeah, I thought this was really good. Really cleverly written, really simply written. Now, I know that there's a film that was made in the 70s as well, so I really want to see that now and compare that to the book and the TV series, and kind of want to do a page picture review. So if you're interested in seeing that, which will be a bit more spoilery, then let me know and I will try and put that together when I've managed to see the film. So that is the 5 books that I read in the last couple of weeks, and as I say, I'm going to be filming another video of 5 more books I've read in the last couple of days. So please do have a chat to me down in the comments. If you've read any of these books, let me know what you thought of them, or if you're interested in reading any of them. I'd love to hear about that too. Please like this video if you liked it, and please subscribe if you haven't already, and you can also follow me on my social media. I'm on Twitter and Instagram, and I'm also on Goodreads. All that information will be listed for you in the description box below. But that's it for today, so thank you so much for watching, and I will talk to you again soon. Bye!